This is the World Satsanga on the 27th of January 2018 in association with Kevin Moore and The Moore Show. And as usual, I'd like to give Kevin my thanks for broadcasting the World Satsanga on his YouTube channel, The Moore Show, and for sharing his viewers and his listeners with me as well. Well, we've got quite a lot to go through today. We've got a lot of questions to go through, but first of all, I'd just like to wish you all a happy New Year. This is the first time I've done the Satsanga in 2018, so it's a bit of a belated Happy New Year, but nevertheless, it is the New Year from our perspective. So first of all, I'm going to go through the talk, which will be on the hidden technology of ancient Egypt, the legacy of Atlantis Part 2, which will go through the energetics. And then I've got a whole bunch of questions I've been given from my listeners that I've received. And then finally we're going to go to a meditation to connect with the soul in the soul seat. Well, in December's Satsang, we went through the what can arguably be called the mechanical side of the legacy from Atlantis that Egypt enjoyed. So these are crystal technologies, transmutation of materials, and the atomic structure of different materials as well. This particular part, I don't expect it will be very long, is to do with the energetic side of Atlantis and the technology that was used by Egypt at the very start of the Egyptian era, and there's a direct replacement for the Atlantean society when the Atlantean society was replaced. Now, a lot of the work that was done in Atlantis had two functions, the physical and the metaphysical, and the instruments that they used, whether it was crystalline or whether it was transmutationary or atomic, had an interface. Now, most of those interfaces were energetic, and that means that they were controlled by thought or by logging into or tuning into the devices that we're using. For instance, we know, because we do it ourselves now, that we can use crystals, for instance, for dowsing, and we can use them for guiding and focusing energy. We can use other metals such as rare metals, pure metals, rare metals being gold and silver, of course, and titanium, and other metals which are pure, and other metals like brass and copper and iron can be used to transmit energy and focus energy, and so can wood as well, and that's represented by a lot of the old myths and legends where wizards had a staff, and the staff was made of wood, which was a broadband conductor, and on top of the staff there was a ferrule of some sort, which would have been a rare metal, rare earth metal, probably silver or gold, and then there would have been a crystal structure at the top, which would have been probably quartz, or usually quartz, could have been diamond in the rare cases, or ruby, or ruby, for instance. And as we go up the different materials, things like wood, it creates a broadband attraction to energies, which pulls energy into the conductor, which is the staff, focuses it down to a narrower band for the rare metals, and then focus it even further into a really narrow band, or even the programmable band of frequency with the crystals. And the Egyptians, as a result of the legacy they received from the Atlanteans, also received some form of ability to tap into energies and control those energies and control the functions of the machines that they use, such as creating a form of anti-gravity by changing the attractivity of the atomic structure of a material, by communicating with the device that did it, energetically or mentally, so to speak. And so most of the work that was done by individuals who were trained to be pure. They were trained to be not to be egotistical. They were trained to serve and be pure in their service to others, and not generate an ego through the level of service that they did to others. So these devices that healed people, various different crystals that healed people and generate light, the various different devices that conducted or attracted energies, but were also energetic or allowed energy to be stored, and the those devices that allowed the transmutation of materials to different conditions of weight, for instance, or mass, through the realignment of the atomic structure. So there was a total neutrality in the attraction and repulsion, for instance, or there was a resistance or a repulsion from the baseline magnetic structure of the Earth, were also controlled by energetic or metaphysical or telepathic communication. There were others, of course. There were devices that allowed the communication between Egyptians from one particular location to another, but that was basically from priest, for instance, or devotee, or an individual who was adept. So I'll call it an adeptee, if you want to call it that, who were able to, and were trained to, and were purified, and therefore capable of working with higher frequencies and not being attracted to the thoughts, behaviours and actions associated with lower frequencies because of the power associated with the use of those frequencies and the energy associated with them as well. So communication tended to be from individual to individual, or devotee to devotee, or priest to priest, or student to student, for instance, rather than through the means of a device. When, however, there was the need to communicate between an adeptee, for instance, and another individual who wasn't adept, then a device would be required, and that device would be able to convert the thoughts or the projected images, the emotional side of the communication that was desired to be projected from the adeptee to the average individual, would be converted from those things I've just talked about into something that the non-adeptee could pick up. And so there was a device, you could almost call it a telephone if you wanted to, that would be able to receive communications that were projected telepathically, focused through a device, and was received by another device because it had an address, for instance, or because the person thought about the individual that they wanted to communicate with, and that device would then broadcast the information, usually in the spoken word, but could also at times link into that non-adeptee telepathically as well, and present them with images and thoughts and feelings surrounding the information that was being broadcast as well. There were many other things. For instance, light was provided by crystalline structures that could be controlled by pure thought. They'd change one state from one state to another state by using the projection of energy. And we use something similar today with liquid crystal displays, whereas at the moment we use electricity to change the alignment of the crystals to block light throughput. With the more advanced and more sort of, also in some respects cheaper displays, such on Kindles for instance, they use a function where the state stays the same until another electric pulse has been sent through the display to change the alignment of the crystals in a different way. So rather in our old cases and current cases of liquid crystal displays, there needs to be a constant voltage going through them to align the crystals in a certain way to block the light out. These static displays, once they're changed, they stay there. They don't need any electricity, but they stay there until there's another set of electric pulses that change their alignment in a different way, and the display shows something else. And there was something similar to that available to them from a light-based perspective, but that was controlled by the use of thought. Other things like farming, the use of thought and projection of energy to the crops was used as well, and that way they could ensure that they maximise their crop yield with a minimum need of planting huge crops. I mean, right now we can plant hundreds of acres of crops for wheat, barley, oats, and other things like corn. Whereas in their day, they would be able to. And we're seasonal as well, of course. We have a seasonal issue. Whereas what they could do is they could create a condition where the genetics of the plant or the crop would operate in a really accelerated and efficient way, and also they could use their energetics to change the etheric function of the weather so that they would be irrigated when they needed to, and that they could keep any cloud cover away from the fields that they were tending, to make sure there was plenty of natural sunlight and therefore gamma rays, etc., and cosmic rays hitting and feeding the crops when it was required. So they could really manipulate on a really accurate basis the conditions and the way in terms of the way they were receiving light, the way they were receiving water. And I'm told right now that they could even change the way the minerals were attracted to certain areas of fields depending upon the plant type or the crop type and the type of minerals that those particular crops required. So in essence, farming was also controlled. Light was also controlled. The preparation of food from cooking as well. They were able to communicate with various different devices to create heat, change the structure of metals, for instance, to create heat. They didn't need to use a flame or electric current to create resistance and therefore make the metal glow, or burn anything to create a flame. They could change the state of the material that this is more the adeptees, by the way, the material or the pots, for instance, that the food was in, to generate heat and also heat the food itself in a holistic and pervasive way, rather than heating from the outside like we do. It was sort of more internally heated throughout sort of heat, similar to what we have with, I guess, microwave radiation, because microwave radiation is more of a holistic cooking device as well. There's everything we can think of that what we used to work with everything we need to survive. The Atlanteans, and a large proportion of this was passed down to the Egyptians, used it on a regular basis. But it tended to be only the adeptees, those individuals who were trained and were pure enough to be able to work in this way without becoming consumed or subsumed by the potential low frequency thoughts, behaviours and actions that are associated with ego when we are, for instance, the only person within a family who's got this capability, and therefore we would think we're better than the rest of the family. In essence, what happened is that other than those who were the teachers and maintained themselves in arguably quite palatial surroundings, and things like the different temples and the palaces and the pyramids were quite palatial. Everything that's in that, what we see now, is not a representation of what the Egyptians had, because what the Egyptians had was really quite high metaphysical technology in comparison to what we have now. But in essence, there was the teachers that were kept pure by being in these temples and areas of teaching. You could call it a university if you wanted to. But in the first uses of Atlantean technology in Egypt, there was, this disappeared quite quickly as it happened, because the individuals with it, I'm going to talk about in a moment, were affected by ego, and so therefore their frequencies dropped as well. So they started to lose the possibility of the power for it. But in essence, within every family group or group of families, there was one person who was trained and taught to be able to use the energies and transmute the energies and direct the energies and work with the energies to achieve the things I've just talked about. They could work with cooking, they could work with the transportation of materials, they could work with communication, they could work with transport, they could work with farming farm in the fields. They could work with any form of labour-saving device that was available, including what we would classify as anti-gravity, which is basically just changing the weight state of a material based upon changing the attractivity of the atomic structure within that particular material. They were all trained to do this, so one per particular family or particular group of family units, to be able to provide a service to those families by being able to work energetically with the tools that could only be, for want of a better word, manipulated energetically. And finally, there's of course the ability to cut large chunks of stone or rock with extreme accuracy. That was again a function of using a device that aligned energies in one particular direction in a very, very accurate way, shearing one particular piece of material for another piece of material by simply changing the bonding of the two, inwardly facing the bonding along a shear line, so that a rock would part on a number of different sides from the rock that surrounds it. And so you could take out a large brick-sized, for instance, or block-sized piece of material very simply, very accurately, with very clean surfaces. And of course, you could also introduce joining or dovetailing types of technologies as well to hold them together at one point as well. And also with these things, I mean, there was also the possibility of joining materials together without glues or without any other form of joins, by simply changing the atomic structure energetically so that they attracted each other. A little bit like a magnet, but more like a blending or a moulding together of the materials together, so it appeared to be one. When you put two together, they appeared to be one, so that it didn't look as if there were two separate items there. So those are the energetics surrounding the sort of the hidden technology of ancient Egypt, which is a legacy from Atlantis. And there's obviously countless other things that I could talk about. For instance, the generation of and the storage of energies within the pyramids, and the different energies that could be gathered at various different locations within the pyramids, and the different ratios of the base to the point at the top that gave the various different energies that could be created. So different pyramid sizes gave the ability to harvest different and capture different energies as well. And of course, all of these things are also controlled energetically by adeptees as well. Okay, so let's go on to the questions, and I believe there is a question as well that talks about or asks a question about from the pyramids as well. So the first question is from WP, and the question goes as follows. Here's another question I've been getting from folks that I know. Christians, of course, worship Jesus as their saviour, but don't necessarily differentiate between the temporary mind, body, ego, Jesus, and the eternal Christ, that was within Jesus, or that Jesus became one with. Regardless, they make Jesus responsible for their so-called salvation rather than taking personal responsibility to grow spiritually. An answer to the following question could be helpful to understand that we all need to grow spiritually whilst incarnate, and it is our responsibility to do so, not Jesus' responsibility. Well, basically, Jesus was a master. He was an ascended master, and he made a number of different quotations, one being, I am the light, and I am the way forwards, etc., etc. And basically he wasn't there to save people per se. He was there to offer them the route to salvation. And the route to salvation was the ability to be in communication with Source or God, and of course the greater reality surrounding that. And he offered one particular way. There was others, of course, Muhammad and the Buddha as well. Various different ways to achieve communion with Source and so-called self-realization. And he did it by basically saying that you disassociate yourself from the thoughts, behaviours and actions, or low-frequency thoughts, behaviours and actions of those around you, and you work in service, and you study yourself, and you try to dissect those thoughts, behaviours and actions that are low frequency and replace them with high frequency thoughts, behaviours and actions. And in doing so, you would create a higher frequency status for yourself, and as a result you would rise up the frequencies and you would gain access to higher frequency functionality as a result of that. So He offered the route to salvation, personal self-realization, communion with Source or God. He never did suggest that he would do it for you. The whole point of it is that you do it yourself. You can be led to the water, so to speak, but it's up to you to drink the water. And the teachings of Jesus, along with other teachings with other ascended masters, were particularly, for want of a better word, even the Hindu texts teach how to become self-realized very, very well, of course. Babaji is another ascended master helping to do this, or non-ascended master in Babaji's case. He's decided to stay here helping us out. But in essence, it was all about us being shown how to do it by somebody who got a particular way that was robust and repeatable. And that's what Jesus did. Next part of this question is, where is the entity that was Jesus now? What's he doing? Well, I believe in a previous Satsanga we identified that he was in quite a high location within the structure of the multiverse. And I don't quite remember where that is now. And there's a number of questions here. I don't have time to go back and find it. But basically, he's in a very high place. He's no longer in a need to incarnate, has no desire to incarnate anymore. That particular piece of work was done. But the whole point of it now, I believe the entity that was incarnated as Jesus is working on ways from the energetic side of how individuals who incarnate with a view to helping us here, people like other people like Eckhart Tolle, for instance, Wayne Dyer, other individuals who are working on helping others better themselves, giving them sort of ways in which they can do it, giving them different levels of motivation, different levels of or different types of medium to help them move forwards and help the people who they get attracted to or who are attracted to them or work with them. So basically they're helping behind the scenes and helping to create the individuals to help move us forwards again, teaching them, training them, giving them ideas on how to circumnavigate certain low frequency thoughts, behaviours and actions, and is also working on those individuals who work on our environment in terms of providing a higher frequency environment for us to work with. So that's what it's doing now. It's basically working for us, but from the higher frequencies of the multiverse, and helping others help us, which is a really wonderful service for him to do. I say him, it's an it. We're all energy, aren't we? So the him bit is just a relationship to, or reference to that which was, in effect, incarnate. Okay, so we've got a couple now. One from JS. First question is based upon the Egyptian work. If the pyramids were not primarily designed for entombing mummies, why did they put them there? Well, basically they were there, and there's lots more. There's a lot more that are under the vast sea of desert that we haven't detected yet. Some have been detected by ground radar, but basically they were there to gather energy. The whole point of the pyramids was to create a sacred geometry-based function that attracted various different energies or allowed the manifestation of certain energies at certain points within that structure. And they were also used at times to help with the initiation of certain priests to be able to work with their energies and also to focus on their training as well. So in effect, they were there to help generate energies, and the different sizes and different ratios of side versus the perpendicular height, for example, are specific to different types of energies that they are able to attract and manifest and store. So that's what they're there for. There are some other things where some of them are aligned to various different celestial configurations, for instance. They are in those configurations to give us some sort of mind candy, so to speak, and make us realise that actually a lot of the Atlanteans, even though the civilization left, have moved on to various different other parts of the local galaxy, so to speak, and some of the pyramids are aligned in a location associated with some of the star configurations to give us an idea of where they come from. But also some of the star configurations, if we know what we're doing, create an energy of their own right, and we can use configurations that duplicate them in the correct ratio to also gather energies associated with those stars, even though they're many light years away. Even though the energy that's being transmitted is quite a distance away, we can also gather that information. Gather that energy and work with that energy. Okay, part 2 of this question. He says the founding of all Egyptian civilization was based upon the life-giving waters of the Nile and the annual flooding covering the surrounding lands with fertile silt. This allowed for several cycles of crop growing in one season. We have seen both the narrow strip of green land along the Nile and then desert beyond. That's because the person asking these questions has actually been to Egypt and seen this. If the ancient Atlanteans had weather technology, why is there no mention of this in the hieroglyphs? Also, all the temples to the various deities are either built along the Nile or very close to the Nile. If Egypt has a one-time technology to create rainfall, why are there not temples in other areas of Egypt remote from the Nile? Well, there are basically. There is lots of temples, but they're all hidden under in various different areas. I mean, an example of this is the Valley of the Kings and the Valley of the Knights, for instance, where the tombs are under great vast amounts of tons of earth to hide them. But also some of this technology was hidden as well because it was recognised that it was going to be, for want of a better word, misused by those individuals who are low frequency. But if you think about it in a different way, the hieroglyphs or the hieroglyphs were basically a written language that was well down the line from the point of when Egypt swapped over from Atlantis in terms of they became the next civilization. The Atlanteans, or those who decided to stay incarnate after the Atlantean fall, went to teach those who reincarnated in the new structure of Egypt. But when this happened, this was a long time before, like tens of thousands of years before. So the hieroglyphs are a function of a very old and decaying civilization. Although we think of it as being quite advanced, at that time it was starting to decay. Now in the hieroglyphs there's obviously some form of written word or communication, but there's also a hidden level of knowledge associated with them. And the adeptees, or those who were taught and those who were pure, were able to read the hieroglyphs and get a different level of information from them, a more metaphysical level of information, one that allowed them to work with different energies and be taught how to work with different energies. But think of it a different way. If we disappeared in about 100 years' time, when most of our paper and books may have been recycled or used and everything else we've got is based upon a server somewhere, you're not going to see any technology that shows that we were quite advanced, are we? So from that perspective, it's a function of the way that they used to work and the advancement of the way they used to work that illustrates that there would be very little physical archaeology left to describe what we were doing. If most of what we are doing is metaphysical or telepathic or energetic, then there will be very little left physically to describe that we were in fact using these methods of communication or manipulating the environment around us and communicating with others. So these pieces of evidence are based upon a very old and decaying civilization, one where they had to work with what was available, living next to their water source, hoping that the Nile would rise and distribute lots of silt on there to fertilise the land, and also working with that rather than rainfall, because at that point in time there wasn't any rainfall on Egypt. There's not much mention of rainfall at all, if anything. But the Atlanteans could change it. So there was no need for, at that point, they'd gone beyond the ability to work with various different technologies, various different energetic technologies. It's in a dim and distant past. So there was, and when you're working purely with the biorhythms of the Earth, and you're having to work with, you know, very basic farming technologies now, because everything else has gone, apart from you know, a bare minimum or a very small number of individuals who are wizened, you know, taught as to be priests or to be capable of working with the energies or the mental thought processes associated with gaining higher frequency. So everything else is basically a farming culture, which is what we see now, and a little bit of wonder about how did these big buildings get made, and the descriptions of how they were made from some of the archaeologists and Egyptologists doesn't wash the clothes for me, to be honest. So there are temples elsewhere, but a lot of them are under several tons of sand because of the vast distances, the vast difference in time between when they were made, used properly, and abandoned. And the people started to migrate towards being highly energetic from a technological perspective, to being basically farmers with a hierarchical structure of kings or pharaohs controlling them, and within those kings and pharaohs, one or two individuals who are pure enough to be able to taught the higher functions, etc. Next one is, what is the large space within the Great Pyramid, which is at least 100 feet long, discovered by scientists recently using muon imaging? It's an area for gathering energy, basically, is what I've just been told. They had to gather energy. They had a function where they could focus the energy, and that energy had to be stored somewhere. Think of the pyramid as in this particular way, in this particular function of a pyramid. Think of it as a battery, and the large space is an area where that energy was contained. The rocks within that area would have been specifically and are specifically transmuted to be able to contain those energies. Think of our colliders, Large Hadron Colliders. We control energies by using a lot of magnets, keeping the electron beams or whatever we're projecting in a particular location. So, and we use magnets to project electron beams and guide them in the old cathode ray tube technology for televisions. So it's pretty much like that. The stones around, which haven't been worked on yet, the stones around that great void would have been there to contain the energies. The energies would have been manifest as a function of technology which has been removed or has dissolved from having the function of having a focus within that area and gathering the energy into that area. Think of it in terms of creating a very localized black hole, for example, or a wormhole, and pulling energy in from one location, one frequency, and placing it in another area, but containing it in a large container within an area that was able to harness, allow the harnessing of, the transmission of, and the storage of that energy. And that's what it's there. That's what that large space is there for, to harness, or to store this energy that was harnessed. Would have been focused there and stayed there. Okay. So the next question from MS is, so if the Egyptians were so high frequency, why did they need water from the Nile when they could control the weather? So similar question. At that point, they weren't. But having said that, though, even when they were higher frequency, sometimes working with the natural functions of the Earth, with the elementals and we call nature spirits, for instance, is also a good thing to do. So, if you think of it in terms of, well, the very first Egyptians were working with individuals who were trained by some of the very last Atlanteans, they could control the weather. But as time goes by and the number of individuals who are able to do this work diminishes, and those and worse still, those who are able to teach individuals to use these energies also gets smaller and smaller. We start to move backwards in our abilities, and we start to work with more basic technologies. So we've gone from controlling the weather down to using. We've gone from controlling the weather to gain water or irrigate the crops on the land, even in those areas that are vast distances away from the Nile, to having to work with the water that's there, because we can no longer generate the energy supporting weather changes. So we have to work with what's available at the Nile. So then you start to get the civilization shrinking and coalescing around the water source, which is what's happened with the Egyptians in the Nile. Next part of this is also if the Atlantean people no longer existed, why? If it's that they dropped in frequency, then why were some spared to pass on technology to the Egyptians? Were they not meant to start from scratch against another civilization? The answer to this question is it's actually in the history of God. So you have to look in one of the pages of the history of God that refers to Atlantis and the Egyptians based upon this. But in effect, Source and those other beings that work with the use of the earth and the human form to accelerate the evolutionary progression of those souls, so to speak, who want to accelerate their evolution through projecting themselves into low frequency environments, felt that it was better to give the new civilization a head start, to take the best of that which was available from the old civilization and place it in the new civilization. And there were those individuals who wanted to stay incarnate or incarnated later, who wanted to help with this kick-starting, so to speak, of the civilization from what would have been basically going back to caveman status, I suppose, but allowing them to come into an instantaneous or fairly instantaneous state of high metaphysical or energetic technology. So it was all to do with not dropping back down to zero, but allowing, because they actually dropped down an awful lot anyway, but trying to recover that level of drop by allowing them to start a bit higher than they would have done had they allowed it to drop down to zero or start from scratch. So in effect, it's all about trying to recover your losses as fast as possible. The incarnate human beings, or the souls or aspects that were incarnating into the human form, were dropping down the frequencies and were starting to lose the functions associated with a higher frequency incarnation. And the objective was to try to stop that as fast as possible. So if they were able to teach people the old skills, the old energetic skills, the objective was to stop this reduction in frequency and start to bring it out the other side. And that was the whole point of trying to create an Egyptian civilization that was already quite instantaneously created, and also had a almost instantaneous level of teaching of high frequency thoughts, behaviours and actions, and metaphysical functionality as well. Okay, so that's the reason why I didn't drop down all the way. It's trying to recover what we'd already dropped down and try to do it in as fast a way as possible. Right, next question. In the History of God, page 31, just how pivotal is the Earth as an experiment? Are we distinct in God's multiverse, or one of many such experiments? And how rare is the individual choice factor referenced in this page? Is it fair to assume that the majority or the vast majority of other sentient beings that we might meet and are collective beings who do not have or even understand the individualized free will? Is it important for us to be consciously grateful for our gift of free choice and our place in the Earth experiment? Earth is pivotal, without doubt. It's a very cleverly located planet, frequentially, of course, he's down in the lowest levels of the frequencies associated with the physical universe, and it's kept in a almost quarantined level, so that the functions associated with individualized free will, and therefore things that come from individualized free will, such as people being selfish and wanting status or high levels of material wealth and high levels of control over other people, is maintained in one particular area, because it would be considered that it would be detrimental to allow that level of ability and to be able to change big things personally would be detrimental to the rest of those incarnate vehicles that are within the rest of the physical universe. So the individual choice factor is extremely rare, it's limited to Earth, although there are other incarnate vehicles or bodies within other frequencies of the physical universe that do have individualized free will, but that individualized free will is assigned to a collective. So they're allowed to have an individual choice factor, but they can't individually activate it, so to speak. That everything has to be done with the consideration of how it's of service to the rest of the collective, so to speak. So although there's various different levels of free will, the ultimate being individualized free will. So there's collective free will, there's pseudo-collective free will, or there's groups within a collective that have free will, but in the group they are collective. And there are other areas where it's only the collective which has the free will, and there's those which have individualized free will within the collective, but they can't initiate it or action it individually. It has to be considered and worked on by the collective before that possibility or that decision that could be activated is chosen and is therefore used if it's beneficial. Okay, so there's various different types of free will, and I believe that in one of the books, it's either the Andialogues or the Origin Speaks, there is a description of different types of free will as well. It might even be repeated in this book I'm working on now, The Curators, but basically there's various different forms or various different functions of free will within the physical universe. Okay, part 2. This is assuming that some groups created the experiment that we are. Is it accurate to assume that the same group monitors us continuously, helping us improve as individuals? And from your recent newsletter, what would the beings who left the Earth around 1200 BC leave us alone and be part of the group that created us, or are they completely separate? In effect, we are being monitored, moulded slowly, and modified slowly, and various different curators work with the various different realities that are created within a particular event space and the various different event spaces that can exist, and they work on trying to create, if you like, a maze that we walk through that sort of adapts to us in the way that we're progressing. And so they're sort of separate to us. They don't incarnate, but they monitor what we're doing, and they try to help us where they can without overriding this individualized free will that we're supposed to have. If you like, when we have a choice to make, they give us the potential to make a more educated choice, so to speak. And that way they sort of lead us down one particular path, which is a better path than the one we might have taken. None of these paths are wrong, it's just that some of them are more efficient than others. And the evolutionary progression associated with these paths is pretty much the same, but it's how fast you gain that same level of evolutionary progression. And what they're trying to do is make us evolve faster, so they can help us move back at the frequencies again. So the group of entities who are monitoring the individualized free will experiments are helping us become more creative and more capable of using our individualized free will in a more accurate way, so to speak. Next question is, in the history of God, page 41, the aliens haven't contacted you yet, but they will within our lifetime. That's the question, is will that happen within our lifetime? So in effect, this particular line is showing that in communication with Source, we are surrounded by other incarnate entities, different levels of frequency sometimes higher than us, sometimes the same level. And they are here now, but because they use various different shielding technologies, because they're very clever, because they're higher frequency, we're not able to detect them. But nevertheless, they're here. They're using the Earth at higher frequencies in conjunction with us and sometimes in sympathy with ourselves. But we are not ready to connect with any other incarnate entity yet, because we haven't sorted ourselves out. When we decide to work individually for the collective of mankind, and we're not thinking of ourselves only, then we start to work and look after and nurture our planet, nurture those plants that we work with, nurture our children, nurture our older people, drastically reduce any waste products from the generation of food, packaging of food, transportation mediums, fuel types, etc., radiation. Once we've managed all of that, we will be able to detect these individuals. Some of them will make themselves known. Others we will detect ourselves when we become higher frequency in a natural way. Okay. Yeah. Next question from the History of God, page 40. Source says, I use the 60th level as a buffer. And the question is, a buffer against what? Why would God have to use a buffer at all? Too much activity or interaction requests to process, for instance, or buffering implies limits and bandwidth constraints. Are there limits that require God to buffer himself against us? Right. That last bit is interesting because it actually comes to what I'm about to suggest is the answer. What I'm told is that there are individuals who quite naturally able to move up the frequencies in a way that isn't consistent with one who is pure. And so that means that what the Source is doing is creating a level where entities who are not pure can still potentially do transcendental meditation type methods of moving the sentience out of the body, or astral travelling, and they can move around and visit various different universes, etc., associated with those frequencies that are above the 12th frequency and up to the 60th, and communicate with other entities. And it's expected that there'll be more and more of these individuals. But these individuals need to be purer than they are now. So to be able to go further, they need to have worked on themselves and reduced the ego to a very small level, so to speak, to allow themselves to work in a way which is consistent with an evolved individual. And once you've done that, you can move above the 60th and communicate with other higher frequency entities and experience what goes on in those particular universes, which may sometimes be translated as being abhorrent, when actually they're not. It's just a poor translationary medium. So there's two things here. One is it's to do with maintaining the purity of the individual, and two, that things get mistranslated around these sort of levels and above. And so the wrong picture can be brought back and broadcast to those who can't move their sentience or their consciousness to these levels. So really it's like a case of stopping this influx of individuals come up and see something and report it incorrectly. It's only allowing those who are pure enough to go to that level to experience, learn, evolve and broadcast it correctly, not those who aren't pure enough. So that's what the buffer's there for, really. I mean, obviously the Source has no limits. From that perspective, it could very easily cope with all of us going up there to that level and communicate with all of us concurrently. But in real, it's all about giving us a goal to go to. If we want to go above this level, we have to be pure. You have to be working for others, of service to others, and not seek self recognition or status from working with others as well to go beyond this level. Okay, so we've got the next question now from US. So just to remind you, the US is the lovely person who transcripts all these long questions for us, and the responses from source and things I channel on the spot as well. It starts as follows. Hi Guy, I have a big question about parallel selves. Recently Kevin Moore interviewed a channel who allowed him to interview one of his parallel selves. Apparently this parallel Kevin, who is gay, exists in a parallel reality which woke up centuries ago and exists in a different frequency. Kevin in our reality asked what is the difference in that parallel world. Parallel Kevin said they don't use money, but they have trade for whatever an entity needs. They are not a technological world, which is an easy world to live on because everything is done for you and everything is free. But there is truly no waking up in that world. They channel ideas for the galactic species that are awakening and ascending as we are, and they themselves are not on the path of ascension like our world is. Their parallel world will die when nobody is energizing the idea any longer. They just walk away and go on to other things. So, previously I told you that evolution is experiential and that everything is only a parallel condition to something else. If it can be experienced, if it can be experienced and it can be experienced in different ways, it should be experienced in all those different ways. That's right. That's a continuous piece of information that gets told to me on a regular basis and is throughout or pervades the new book called The Curators. So with this start in mind, there's a bunch of questions that comes with this, and of course this brings up some questions about the degree of diversification in our parallel incarnations. First one is, do most souls explore different gender orientations as parallel selves, such as gay, bisexual, transgender, etc., or is it just some souls who choose to do that in the human form? Well, outside of the parallel conditions, we all experience all of those different gender orientations anyway. It's part of our complete experiential set of things that we do, basically. We're all ladies, we're all gentlemen. This is from an earth-based perspective, by the way. We have the gay, bisexual, transgender. We also we're rich or abjectly poor. We're beggars. We're architects. We're kings. We're sailors. You know, we have to experience every potential opportunity that is available to us in this particular condition. Now, I'm going to split off now the difference between parallel conditions and reality, because a reality is something that we create within an event space. An event space is an environment within a space that allows us to experience a set of experiences and the interactions with other individuals who are also experiencing their experiences within a set environment. So, to answer the question, this happens anyway, even in our current event space and in other lives. And it is reasonable to assume that we might well do that as well in other parallel conditions. It's more likely, though, that we'll experience different, shall I say, event streams rather than gender opportunities, for instance. So we will be experiencing failing an exam versus passing an exam, missing a bus versus taking the bus, being on a plane that's crashing versus being on a plane that doesn't crash. You know, these are different things that we would experience as part of our parallel opportunities, rather than specifically just the gender opportunities there. And don't forget, parallel condition or event space is created through choices or decisions based upon those choices, the possibility of having a choice, the possible possibility of having a choice, or the possibility of possible possibilities of having a choice. So it's a really fractalized and complicated thing to consider when we talk about, which particular event space or parallel condition we move down. The second one is, does the technological will represent a branch off the mainline path, which goes off into a dead end or collapses into the trunk at some point? So this means, does it expand into a reasonable event space and the event stream associated with it, and then sort of at some point contracts back into the mainstream or the trunk of the main event space, or is it done just to get experience or more evolutionary content, not for ascension opportunities? Everything that we experience from the mainline event space and the parallelized event spaces and the various fractal conditions associated with that are all basically available for us to use for our evolutionary progression and therefore ascension. So everything that we experience, and bear in mind that we won't particularly experience it ourselves, but our true energetic self will experience that which a parallel guy, for instance, or two or three or four of them, or several hundred parallel guys are experiencing because a different decision was made. For instance, if I went to live in Germany rather than the UK, or decided or didn't decide to stop work and start to do this, there's all little versions of me that didn't do something or did do something or did something else further on down the line and chose some other path. So the true energetic self experiences all of these different things concurrently and therefore benefits from it. It's just that us in this particular environment, this particular event space, don't see these things whilst we're in this event space because it's too low frequency and it would confuse us. Now, I've mentioned this before in another World Satsanga, but I do know of an individual, one of my students, had a son who was uncontrollably moving between different event spaces. There was two other event spaces he was going through, and it was confusing beyond belief because that individual thought he was doing something that was going to benefit him or was going to work well, or was doing jobs and roles that he had to do to work with a particular event space, and then suddenly find himself back in this event space and find out that it was completely incorrect. Or individuals who the other parallel version of him had worked with said that he'd done something that he couldn't remember. So, it's not just a case of, we moving around event spaces or parallel conditions, but that bearing in mind that it's quite likely that those other parallel versions of us will move into our event space as well. So everything is used for ascension purposes of the true energetic self, and if we have lots and lots and lots of different event spaces we're working with, you can imagine how the parallel processing is going on at the true energetic self level. It's basically experiencing lots and lots of things concurrently, which is really efficient in terms of ascension, and of course in terms of progressing and evolving as a result of that. Okay, next one. But a parallel will collapses. What happens to the parallel self if it ceases to exist? Does its sentient energies go back to the soul or the aspect that projected it, or can they go off and to do something else? As Parallel Kevin said, is that something else done through another parallel projection off another branch in the same soul's tree of life in the same incarnation? My understanding is that something else is basically returning back to the mainstream event space that created that particular branch. So as we move off if we have a trunk, for instance, of event space, and we make a decision that takes us away from that trunk, part of us continues on the trunk and may go into a different branch later, but part of us stays in this trunk, another part of us goes in the branch. So one of us, we split into two. Totally self-contained, knowledgeable, capable, educated, aware, so to speak, of who and what we are. Not in terms of the self-realized condition, but in terms of the work that we're doing in that particular event space. We're totally capable, and we move into different things. And then maybe we have another decision where we go forwards. We can go forwards or go to another branch, and so we start to fractalize. Well, as that branch comes to an evolutionary dead end, where we've experienced all we can achieve in that particular branch, if we go down to a point where it's a twig, for instance, we move back down to the branch. So that part of us, which is parallelized, so to speak, into another branch, that's gone further and has experienced the evolutionary dead end, then gets withdrawn back into the previous branch or even trunk that it was fractalized from. So the doing something else is coming back to where it was, basically. Or it may well be that the sentient energies associated with that are then recollected and reprojected into another change in direction, another event space, because that sentience needs to be used to do that, because of the parallel conditions ebbing and flowing, so to speak. So something else can be moving back into communion with the rest of the sentient energy in a more upstream function of the event space, or it can be reused to experience something where there's going to be another choice, and therefore another event space is going to be created further on downstream. Okay. So the next question is, do most souls or aspects choose to explore some utopian and dystopian worlds as part of their evolution in most lifetimes? There are quite a few TV shows more about dystopian worlds, e.g. where Hitler won the war, or where World War II never happened, or where synthetic humans take over humanity. If we truly diversify all the different ways in each lifetime, it blows my mind. It blows most people's minds, including mine sometimes. It's not just about choosing the window seat versus the aisle seat on a train or a plane. It's about exploring all of these different worlds as parallel selves. It makes you laugh at your own life. Yes, it does. We explore these other worlds, utopian, dystopian, average, boring, advancing, technologically advanced, civilization-based advanced, energetically advanced, simply as a function of moving into the event spaces where these things are happening as a result of the choices that are made by ourselves and those other incarnate entities around us, therefore the event space that is created as a result of that. And so it's more like it happens, but it's not specifically designed to happen that way. So the randomness associated with the fractal generation of event spaces is the beauty of it. It's not that we choose to explore a utopian society, or one society where one thing happened but it didn't in another society, for instance, as a result of parallel conditions and the event spaces. It's just that it happens as a result of the choices that we make. Now, from our perspective, as a projected aspect, smaller projected aspect of our true energetic self, it's mind-blowing, full stop. We don't have the sentient capacity, whilst incarnate, to be able to absorb all this stuff. Clearly, when we disincarnate, we do, because we start to work in a higher frequency condition, and the information that is in those higher frequencies becomes available to us, and our functionality increases, so we can assimilate it on an instantaneous, complete, robust and understanding, and full understanding as well. So this happens outside of the incarnate regime. Now, all these things that happen concurrently, if they happen from the different event spaces, are totally assimilated by the true energetic self, constantly and all the time. And of course, all of those things that are assimilated by all of the true energetic selves that are created by Source are also assimilated by Source. And all that that's assimilated by all the different Source entities from all their different creations are assimilated by the origin. So it's sort of an upward sort of hierarchical structure where the origin enjoys everything that the Source entities experience, either directly or indirectly through their creations, and the Source entities enjoy everything that's created through their creations from an indirect perspective, and our true energetic selves enjoy what we create for them indirectly as well. But in essence, the true energetic self will experience all of these different fractalized versions of ourselves concurrently, and it has, from our perspective, infinite capacity to do so. So yeah, it's all about part of us is working with another part that has chosen a different way. For instance, one of us chooses to be a doctor, while the other one chooses to be an engineer. One chooses to be a medical nurse, while the other one chooses to be a botanist. You know, and all the decisions associated with those different event spaces and the event and the fractalized event spaces that come off those, and the subsequent event streams within those event spaces as well. And again, if you look at it from a particularly static perspective, if we have to, we will enjoy or experience all of these different types of worlds and experiences and states of beingness on Earth and in other various different environments and form and body form factors around the physical universe. In a single level structure and in a completely fractalized structure associated with different event spaces, and it's all done concurrently. And if you've ever, well, I saw an image of all this working, and it's like trees growing trees within a sphere, which is growing a tree. It's just everything is growing, everything is part of something else, is connected to something else. It's unbelievable, and everything is being experienced concurrently. So it's too difficult for us to get our heads around. We just have to work with what's there and recognise that actually there are bigger things afoot, and those bigger things are us. But we'll only find them out when we become disincarnate. Okay. Right, last set of questions from SO. And SO says, hopes I'm well, and recently started listening to the Satsanga on YouTube. So fantastic, you're listening to it on YouTube from Kevin Moore's broadcasting. Thank you. What a wealth of information, and thank you for your generosity in sharing with us. It's a pleasure. It's not an easy job, by the way, and it's certainly not an egotistical ride. It's hard work, but it's something I know I've got to do. It's something I realise that I've been planning for all my life when I look back. And I know it's got a finite time to do it as well, a lifetime, so to speak. But the lifetime of an efficiency of me being able to generate the information and write it down and broadcast it is of a limited state of beingness. My particular event stream in doing this work is limited, so I have to get a move on, basically. Okay, so let's look at the questions here. Right, in my recent awakening awareness, or as I like to call it, becoming a better me, I've started to donate blood. Fine. Now I know that in essence we're all one, but I wonder what effect someone receiving my blood has on them. On a spiritual awareness level, I am able to, am I able to influence an individual in any way through my blood? Also, do the blood groups have any particular meaning? I am A positive and wonder if it has any significance. Well, strangely enough, I'm A positive as well. Physically, the blood groups lean towards certain metabolisms that can cope with certain physical food types. And A positive is one of those that's supposed to be able to cope with a pure vegetarian diet, and others are supposed to be able to cope with pure meat diets, and others are supposed to be able to cope with omnivorous diets, for instance. So they have a physical function that's associated with what they are. And also they have a level of protection against various different viruses and diseases, so that the whole of the human genome doesn't die out in one go if there's a epidemic, for instance. So it's all part of a safety switch to make sure that we're able to cope with various different food sources, and that we're also protected against various different low-frequency conditions that create viruses or illnesses, for instance. Okay. In terms of blood, do you have an influence on them? Well, as with transplants of organs, the blood is a transplant, isn't it? So there will be a certain level of energy associated with you, not your sentience, but an energy associated with what is you, what's been created you in your incarnation, that goes with that blood and dissolves in with the energies of the receiving individual or the patient or participant. And this is the same with the organ transplants. And it's been recognised that some individuals, physically recognised, that some individuals who take on things like somebody's liver or heart or lungs, for instance, or kidney or anything else, does have a change in personality. And that change in personality is associated with the personality or the ego that's created through separation of the or near total separation of the aspects from the true energetic self as a result of going down the frequencies to achieve incarnation. And so the ego that's created is also passed on. And so you'll find that an individual who receives a transplant of anything, including blood, will receive a little bit of your personality, so to speak, as a result of that. Okay. Next question is, I heard that Dolores Cannon once spoke about HIV and AIDS being created by the government. What are my views on that? I'm just asking the question, actually. No, I think that's a piece of misinformation. What I'm picking up is that certain illnesses are created through genetic dysfunction or energetic dysfunction, or simply nature finding a way of reducing the population and keeping it in tune with the abilities for the earth to support it. So there are areas where we have various different viruses. I mean, cholera was one, for instance, and TB was another, and the Black Death was another one, where there needed to be a certain number of individuals removed from the incarnation, because that body type or that genome type wasn't going to be an efficient body type or genome type for future generations of incarnate being. So the entities that govern the use of the earth and the use of the particular bodies to help us to experience and explore individualized free will through incarnation to those frequencies associated with the multiverse, allow certain body types or genomes to be removed from service, so to speak, and that is done through the introduction of various different illnesses or viruses, either directly through the curators, for instance, or the elementals, or as a function of the natural function of Gaia or the Earth working on its own to reduce the number of incarnate vehicles available within a certain location within it. So it's a natural function of attrition, basically, to summarise. Not something that's been created by a government. There's bound to be lots of different viruses that have been human generated, that have been cultured and cultivated, but this isn't one of them. Although I am fairly sure various different mutations of HIV and AIDS are available in various covert labs around the world. Okay. Right. Next question is, at what frequency is my true? It's got analytical self there, but it's energetic self. Are all true energetic selves, e.g., as my two sons and my husband's, at the same frequency? What does my higher self look like? Somehow I am imagining a trail of light and matter in space. Okay, there's two parts to this. I'll answer the first part generically. Basically, the true energetic self resides in a frequency within the structure of the multiverse that is associated with the evolutionary level achieved by the true energetic self itself, not the individual aspect that's projected into one part of or many parts of the multiverse environment. So this particular one needs to be answered in a consultation to find out the exact location and evolutionary level for this particular individual. But in general, most individuals who are asking me questions or ask for a consultation are in the fourth full dimension upwards, generally. I've seen the odd one or two in the third full dimension, but most of them in the fourth upwards, because they're becoming more and more self-aware and self-awake. It is not a necessary requirement for any other incarnate aspects, whether they're sons or husbands, to have their true energetic self to be in the same frequency or be at the same evolutionary level. Although sometimes there is a necessity if one particular aspect is incarnating and is of a really high evolutionary level, to make sure that the partner that they will eventually couple up together with on Earth is of a higher frequency, so there's a level of understanding, for instance, and a level of being able to work together. So there is some minor correlation there in terms of the evolutionary level and the location within the structure of the multiverse, but it's not totally necessary. The higher self looks basically like sentient energy. And don't forget, the sentience is what we are. The energy is just a vehicle that we use to move around the volume of the source. We are sentient energy with a body of energy that's given to us. Not a body like a human body, but just energy that can be used to manipulate the environment. So if you want to think of it in very basic terms, we would be a ball of sentient energy that reflects and deflects light in myriad ways, and those reflections represent various different, I suppose, thought processes, if you want to call it that. Next question is, what frequency is source entity 1 and the origin at? Source entity 1 isn't at a frequency as such, it's above the frequencies associated with the multiverse is created, of course. There's frequency, subdimension, full dimension, and then above that there's zones. And the zones is a higher piece of structure of the source entity. Now, the origin is, of course, everything. So, the source entity is an individualized unit of sentience, of origin sentience, as is source entities 2, 3, 4, up to 12. But the origin is everything, basically. And although it is an infinitesimal level of frequency or level of structure, it is the structure. So you can't say what frequency the origin is at, because it's every frequency and every other piece of structure that's associated with it. Currently known, and that it is polyomniscient within, and that which it is not particularly aware of, or maybe is aware of, but it hasn't investigated it or explored yet. So we can't really say that the origin is at a particular frequency. It's at every frequency. And actually, source entity 1, looking at it from that way, is at every frequency that is within its multiversal environment. It's in the frequency, all the frequencies associated with the 12 full dimensions, but it's also in everything, all the dimensions associated with the different zones within itself as well. So it's beyond that level of structure, because the frequency is the lowest level of structure within the origin, basically. And it's also, therefore, the lowest level of structure within the source entity. Next question is, how many people on Earth do I estimate are in contact with the origin? Now, that's a good question. Actually, I don't know. Let's have a look. Okay. I am told that properly, in communication with the origin, there's half a dozen. That's 6. But I've also been told that when the new white children are all incarnate at the same time, that each of those will also be in communication with the origin. So if we consider that I know that there's 2 alive, one's going to be born, then you add those to the half a dozen that I know about, or just been told about, which includes me, then there would be 9 right now. 1 not being quite born yet, but you can add that on. And then there's going to be another 9, so there'll be a total of 18. But that will be possibly towards the end of getting close towards the end of my particular incarnation. Okay, well that's the end of the questions. Lots of really deep thinking questions. Thank you very much. Just going to go to the last part of this particular satsanga now, which is the meditation to connect with the soul in the soul seat. Okay, so I want you to just close your eyes, sit straight in, hopefully you've got a straight backed chair. Okay, back straight, feet flat on the ground, palms faced uppermost and resting on the interface between the upper thighs and the lower body. Okay, with the eyes closed, we focus on the origin of the third eye, not the third eye chakra. They're in a similar location, but they're not the same thing. And I want you to just concentrate for a moment on nothing. Allow yourself to just be for a moment. Because we use the eyes and the ears and the nose and the mouth as a function of 4 of our 5 senses, and those 4 of those 5 senses are in the upper part of our body, our head, we associate our sentience, our beingness, what we are, as being in the head. This isn't specifically true. The essence of what we are, our soul, or the aspect, the smaller aspect of sentient energy that's projected into this particular body, is located in something called the soul seat. Barbara Brennan describes this as the soul seat. And it's an area which is in between the two connectivity points between the front aspect and the rear aspect of the heart chakra. The heart chakras are in the center of the front of the chest, in the middle of the sternum, and the opposing rear chakra is in the same place on the spine. But in the area where the front and rear chakras join in the center, which is a function of Hara, the Hara line, is a location where the sentience that is us, the smaller aspect of our true energetic self, that is us, resides. The motivating or the animating energies that are controlled by the sentience sit in the Tantien, 3 inches or 75 millimeters up from the navel or belly button, and 3 inches or 75 millimeters in towards the center of the body towards the spine. So we have 2 functions in the way in which the sentient energy, that is our soul, or the smaller aspect of our true energetic self, integrates with the human form. The energy integrates with the human form at Tantien. And the soul, or the aspect, the sentience integrates at the point in between the 2 heart chakras. So what we're going to do now is just using this assumption about what we think we are, our state of beingness from a physical perspective, resides in the head. We're going to move that focus of attention, because that's all it is a focus of attention from the point of where the third eye is, between the 2 eyebrows and above the bridge of the nose, on the forehead. We're going to move it diagonally back down towards the spine, where the top of the spine meets the skull. So just visualize or feel your sentience moving away from its current state of focus, which is in between the two eyebrows and above the bridge of the nose, and starts to move back down, diagonally back towards the point where the skull interfaces with the top of the spine. Now I want you to move your sentience down through the spine, going past the rear aspect of the throat chakra, moving down the spine, to the centre of the spine, till you get to the point where the rear aspect of the heart chakra is manifest through the back of the spine. Bearing in mind that there's an energy tube or pipe that goes from the top of the body all the way down to the centre and splits out at the pelvis down its leg. And this is called the hara line. And the energies associated with the chakras are joined to the body along this line. They're sometimes called the plexuses. Okay? The connection points are called the plexuses. So when we get to the rear aspect of the heart chakra with our sentience, I want to move back in towards the centre. That point where the front and rear aspect of the heart chakra join together. And once you've reached there, I want you to realise that where you are is in a very sacred place. You have a heart chakra in front of you, you have a heart chakra behind you. At the point of where the front and rear aspects of the heart chakras join this hara line, this heart chakra plexus, or juncture, if you want to call it that, you may see manifest in your mind's eye a very bright white star-shaped object. This is your sentience. This is the smaller unit of sentience which is projected from the true energetic self into the human form. So move towards this, move down whichever chakra, front or rear aspect of the heart chakra you're in now. Okay, move towards this bright star-shaped light. When you get to this bright star-shaped light, realise that it is almost a solid object. It's a fully sentient object. It's not solid, it's just packed sentience, compressed sentience. Sentience has to be compressed to allow it to integrate with the human form. So, although there appears to be a little wall around it, this star-shaped, this three-dimensional star-shaped light, just push yourself through this unassuming barrier that creates the form of a star. And move inside, and you're surrounded by unbelievably white light. You're now in the sentience that is your soul. The smaller aspect of sentience that is ultimately a part of an individualized part of your true energetic self. Bask in the love that you receive from this sentience, pure sentience. Feel how wonderful it is to be with your soul in the area of the human form that it normally resides within. This is the ego returning to its origin. What we are is a temporarily created personality associated with the human form that is created as a result of the near total separation of the soul from the true energetic self, resulting from being projected into lower frequencies. Notice how the ego starts to dissolve. This individualized sentient energy that's associated itself with the human form dissolves in the light or the purity of the sentience of your soul. Just bask in this light, bask in the love of the soul, bask in the feeling of completeness you have when this temporary personality of your ego dissolves in the soul. Realize how all of the inhibitions that you had as an incarnate being also dissolve. Anxiety dissolves, lack of confidence dissolves, lack of motivation dissolves, lack of understanding dissolves, anger dissolves, hate dissolves, worry dissolves, concern dissolves, inadequacy dissolves. All the things that limit us, our thinking, our education, our parents, teaching of our teachers at school, teaching we receive as being friends with various other incarnate beings, all starts to dissolve. Just notice how you start to become a more evolved being. More complete being, more knowledgeable being, more understanding being, more confident being, more capable being, no limitations. There isn't anything that can't be done. We'll stay here for a few minutes so that you can recharge yourself, so to speak, in this purity of what you are, with the focus that is your ego being dissolved in that which you truly are, which is a small individualized unit of sentience from your true energetic self. Okay, so now, having experienced connection with your soul in the soul seat, you can move your attention back to where it normally is in the physical form, which is in the head. So move back towards the rear aspect of the heart chakra until you make the interface of the heart chakra with the spine. Then move up the spine, slowly moving past the throat chakra, up towards the back of the head where the spine meets the lower part of the skull, and move diagonally across from that point to the position in between the two eyebrows and above the bridge of the nose, where the spiritual or third eye resides. Just start to realize that you start to feel that you are the human form again, and that the focus of your sentience is in the head, knowing of course the actual focus is in between the two heart chakras, front and rear aspects of the heart chakra, in that the location of those the plexuses that join them together, on that function of the hara line where the two heart chakras join together. So slowly come back into the room and open your eyes and take a drink of liquid such as water. Okay. It'll slowly ground you, and you'll feel a little bit high after this, so be careful with how you move around. And just like to thank you again for participating in this particular Satsanga. The next one's at the end of February. I'm just going to look at the date this is going to be, and I'll send out the recording associated with this forthwith on both on the website and the emails, and of course via Kevin Moore's website. And it's looking like it'll be the 24th of February. Okay, so much love to you all, and much love from the source, and again, Happy New Year to you, although it's a bit belated now, 3 weeks into it, nearly. And thank you for taking part, thank you for the questions, and sources, and God's love to you all, and Namaste.
Did you see the aliens in Crete?